It's August 12th, 2016. Hello and welcome. My name is Brian McAvoy.
And I'm Tim Shank. This is episode 6 of Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community.
Today's episode is called Additional Senses.
Brian, we talked about electrical field sensing in a previous episode. As an electrical engineer, what's your experience?
In one of the other episodes, I talked about where I used my magnet sense to diagnose a panel in a couple seconds rather than taking several minutes or even an hour to diagnose it.
How so?
I was able to find a component that wasn't operating. It turned out it was just a circuit breaker was in the wrong position, had been tripped. So I was able to use my sense to locate the troublesome component and get the panel up and running.
I've never sensed an electrical field.
Most people haven't. Stock humans don't come equipped to sense magnetic fields. The way I do this is I have a magnet implanted in my ring finger that vibrates when it's around an alternating magnetic field, such as the transformer, which had tripped the circuit breaker. So normally those put off a pretty significant magnetic field, and I'm now used to just being able to feel those whenever I'm near them with my hand. And when it wasn't, my brain went, there should be something there. Similarly, I can sense magnetic fields from permanent magnets. It's kind of the difference between something that's fuzzy or rough that has a specific texture, and the permanent magnet fields are smooth.
You know, I've had my magnet in for over a year, and I've never felt a magnetic field with it. I don't know if that's because it's too small, or the placement, or maybe I'm just not sensitive enough.
Well, I'll rig something up that will test your magnet so we can get an idea of if it's strong enough. The first thing most people feel when they get a magnet is a microwave oven. Those put off enormous fields, and it's just the large transformer inside of them. It's a very common device.
Yeah, you know, I get that. I get that, and I hear people talking about it. But to me, I don't see it as being of value unless it has a practical use. And for you, as an electrical engineer, it certainly does. When other people have a magnet inserted and have to reach around the backside of a microwave or anything, that's not really practical. So maybe that's where the disconnect is for me.
For me, in its raw form, just being able to sense where a refrigerator magnet is. Like if somebody laid a piece of paper down and said, "Hey, Brian, find the magnet. It's somewhere under that piece of paper." Yeah, I could tell them exactly where it is. Cool party trick. But it, like you said, it doesn't have a practical application for most people. However, you've started experimenting with some things that are going to make it practical for you.
So my magnet's in the side of my hand, close to my wrist, and I put it there specifically so that I could attach devices to my wrist that generate that electric field. The prototype that you built and that I've worn, and it's amazingly fun, is a sonar sensor that I can mount to my wrist, and this sensor then feeds a solenoid that creates that magnetic field for me based on the sensor readings. So in essence, I was feeling the sensor readout, and that was exciting. That was fun, like roller coaster fun.
And I think the advantage of doing it with something like an implanted magnet is that it's a much more intimate or deeper sense of what's happening. It's something that you can always feel, sure, but when it's hooked up to a sensor like a distance sensor, the sonar, it's way more connected. It's not just, like if you read numbers off of an electronic tape measure, you're like, oh, that's 12 feet away. You don't have a sense of where it is. You don't really, you have to kind of mentally process, oh, that's 12 feet away. That's about twice as long as me.
I agree with you entirely. And one thing that was interesting when I was wearing the prototype, I didn't wear it for a real long time because I don't want to train on a device that's not fully functional, was that as I was doing it, after a while, I stopped feeling the vibration and kind of had a knowing of where the objects were that I was extending my hand towards. And that's where it really gets exciting, because I'm not reading something with my eyes, which is also distracting. My brain is actually translating that input into a different type of information than vibration or pressure or whatever kind of sensor it is.
Yeah, the plasticity of the brain is what's so exciting about this is when you have that constant input, like you said, you stop feeling the vibration. It's no longer just this like, oh, you're not processing it as there is a thing inside my body which is vibrating according to this magnetic field. You just go, the direction my hand is pointed, it's sensing something a ways away or something is close. And that's what I was trying to get at, saying that it's deeper, it's more intimate.
And I think I've read some studies that show that your brain actually begins processing that type of information in a different area of the brain. So what I'm thinking of, and I forget the exact study, but you and I we watched a TED Talk on this, where they're using arrays of vibrators and they're attaching it to people's backs. And those vibrators are mapped to an image of what's going on around them. I think what we were watching was somebody was reading with it. The brain actually starts processing that vibration in the visual center of the brain. So to the brain, it's an image, even though there is nothing coming in through the eyes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That part of your brain is well suited for processing that kind of information. So if somebody is deaf and they have something similar, that array of vibrators on their back, it makes perfect sense that the part of the brain used to process sound waves reroutes those signals and says, okay, this is what's happening in the air around you.
Well, that's just super exciting. It's kind of hard to conceptualize until you get your mind around the idea, but it is truly possible now for us to add senses to our bodies with electronics.
Totally, and not just the magnets either.
No, not just the magnets. You and I were talking again in a previous episode. We've talked about the North Paw before, and that's not even, there's no implant involved with that. But there's vibrators around the ankle, right?
Right. And as a user wears that and becomes accustomed to it, they get a much better sense of direction. Now, my sense of direction is just awful. If you ask me to navigate myself from my house to the bottom of my stairs, I'll probably have to stop and get directions.
Come on.
But people who have worn this device, the North Paw, for a considerable amount of time, they said that they don't worry about looking up maps when they leave, especially to go somewhere familiar. They say they can always feel like they know how to get home, whether they're biking or walking or even driving. And what was really fascinating is they said when they took it off, they felt like that sense was gone. Like it should be there. Your brain expects that input, and it's gone.
No, once the brain wires itself, it feels that.
And it's like wearing a heavy backpack all day and then taking it off, and you're like, oh, I'd grown accustomed to that being there, but man, I'm glad it's gone. But kind of the opposite here. You're like, oh, I'm missing something like important.
And there's a new version of that out it's not implanted, but they use piercings to attach it to the chest is the recommended area. Is that right? What's the name of that one?
It's the North Sense. It's actually attached to the chest, right over the solar plexus. Now that one's kind of neat because it's not worn, it's not implanted, it's in between. It uses, like you said, piercings to hold it in place. Instead of vibrating in one of 8 directions, it vibrates only when you're facing north, which is nearly as valuable. It's definitely a step up from what I have.
But let's talk about the implant that you're developing, Brian, because I like the idea of it. Now, you're working on a mechanical implant, right?
Yeah.
That does this similar thing. Works in a similar way, too, right?
Right. The one I'm working on, instead of relying on batteries that need to be charged or replaced, is mine's going to be purely mechanical. The idea behind mine is that you would maybe get it installed on your lower leg, because your lower leg, whether you're biking or walking, is pretty much vertical. So when you're facing north, if something inside there would make a tapping sensation, you should get a very definite feeling that, hey, I'm going north, and I should be. Now, let's say you're in the woods and you don't have any way to charge this, doesn't matter, and you're trying to make yourself walk east, and all of a sudden this starts tapping. You now have a definitive alert that you're going the wrong direction and you need to correct your path.
That's excellent. I like the idea that it doesn't rely on a power source.
Power sources, if you do anything with implants, power is the biggest thing holding these back. We've got so much technology that's been miniaturized, and we hesitate to make it implantable because you need a battery. A battery is big, and lithium is kind of dangerous if it goes off, and those batteries can get hot, they can explode. And so anything that is made for implantation, like a pacemaker, needs to be very well sealed up, and it needs to be tested against damage. If something should happen to it, it can't hurt you.
I have an idea for, maybe not an implant. You could use an implant for this, but I have an idea for something that I want to call a spidey sense. I hope I didn't break any copyrights there. But my idea is that just like any of these other, it all depends on sensors. So I'm thinking a radio receiver tuned specifically to emergency bands could be calibrated and provide alerts when an emergency vehicle is nearby. I think it's exciting in some ways because it is a superpower that we've seen in popular media.
If you were waiting for some crime to fight and just kind of wake up out of bed and be like, oh, something's afoot. That'd be great. Sometimes when I'm driving, my volume is up so high that I don't notice the ambulance or the police car or the fire truck behind me until I'm the jackass who's sitting in traffic blocking the thing, and I feel like an idiot.
Funny you mentioned that, because that is exactly what happened to me today. I was driving in traffic, and I didn't even realize the ambulance was coming up behind me. But if I had a spidey sense, I would have known.
Oh, you'd have known a half a mile earlier.
Well, I think a half a mile is a bit long, because we live within half a mile of a police station, so that would be that'd be terrible.
Dependent on speed. High speed equals wider range.
Good idea. And one of the reasons I got my magnet implanted where I did is because I have this vision of having a magnet in the side of each hand and an array of cuffs that each one has a different sensor. So if I'm doing home improvements and I need to know where all the wires and pipes are in the wall, I could have a metal detector on one hand and an electrical current sensor on the other, and basically just feel the pipes and wires behind my walls. At the same time, you could do sonar and infrared.
Yeah, you could have any array of sensors. You could have a heart rate sensor to be able to lay your hand or your cuff on somebody else and know their heart rate, or a temperature sensor to know if your coffee is cold or if your neighbor's coffee is cold.
Oh, I want a heart rate sensor on one hand, and then what are the paddles called?
Defibrillator.
A defibrillator on the other. Heart rate sensor, defibrillator.
You could also use the defibrillator for self-defense.
Oh, yeah. But now we're getting off topic, because that's not a second sense. That's an ability.
We never get off topic.
Yeah.
One other implant that I thought of that we hadn't mentioned that is kind of similar is people who have put magnets in the tragus of their ears so that they can use wireless neck collars to broadcast sound to their ears. Invisible headphones.
Rich Lee did that first, didn't he?
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, he was the first. He had 2 small magnets. I think they were Hayworth magnets put into his tragus, and he's able to pick up audio.
For people who don't know, what's a tragus?
It's the little nubby thing close to your jaw hinge.
Right in front of the ear canal, right?
Yeah. I wanted to get technical with jaw hinge. And
the nubby thing, is that a technical term?
Yes. You can look that up. I'm pretty sure Google Images will turn up plenty.
I'd be afraid to search nubby.
Yeah, don't do that. Maybe I need a sixth sense of, like, you're about to do something dumb on the internet.
Boy, would that be valuable. You could sell that one.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. It would be the same one that deletes your internet history when you die. It's like, oh, your core body temperature has gone down so far that you must be dead. Wipe your browser.
That's funny.
Not really a sense, but might make a good implant.
Absolutely. A professor in Europe somewhere, he implanted a Wi-Fi module and a sensor that I believe he could tap on something, and then his wife had one had some kind of device. I don't think she had the implant, but in the end, he could communicate with his wife by tapping his hand.
They said it was kind of like a ghost sensation. If somebody would touch this guy's arm, his wife could feel it, and vice versa. He could feel if she brushed her hand against someone.
I think his name was Kevin Warwick.
Yep, that's the one.
Well, that's an exciting thing because he's actually communicating across the internet with an implant. That's so cool. So cool. I think we're out of time here, Brian. So I want to say to all of our listeners, thank you for listening, and invite you to contact us by email with any questions or requests or just chat at 2xcbmic@twincitiesplus.org. That's two cyborgs and a microphone, except for it's 2xcbmic@twincitiesplus.org.
And a special thank you to Zach Dolan, who created the awesome cover art for our podcast. This has been Brian McAvoy.
And this is Tim Shank. Please join us next time when we'll talk about nootropics, neurogenics, and adaptogenics, truly smart pills.
I'll be doing most of the listening. This is Tim's field.
So you've been listening to Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community.